Hospitality and gift giving are very important in Irish culture. Is the bedrock of Irish culture. There are rules about it, laws, fines if you don't act hospitable. If someone comes to your door and you don't feed them, there's a fine. If they're hungry and you don't give them food, there is a fine. This is in the Brehon laws. And not all the Brehon laws were the same everywhere exactly. But it was the idea. You treated people well, especially when it came to food and stuff, but also gifts. And there's a story of a Leinster king who invited other kings to visit him. And there were 8 deputies in all. And at the end of their little feasting, he handed out a golden brooch to each one of them. Now, he didn't do it personally. He had a servant do it for him. Except the last person to get a brooch realised their brooch wasn't made of gold. It was silver. And they complained. And they said, why is mine not gold? And the king said, the gold's only for actual kings. Man didn't like this. He got up, smacked the server, starts raging. Everyone gets up in arms, literally with their swords. It's going to be a fight. It's going to be a war because of a brooch. But it happened in all levels of society. So below the kings and the nobles, you had the wealthy people, the rich farmers. And in Ireland, we had a boara. A boara is a cattle lord. This is someone who had vast tracts of land, and it was all theirs by relations. This piece was their cousins, this piece was another cousin's, but they looked after it as a client for their king. And there was a particular boara who lived in northern Leinster. And he was a mean man who did not like to share. He didn't like to give anything. Kind of a tradition in Ireland that when you own lots of land and you're growing lots of things, that people who don't quite have that ability or that resource or that access might pinch a cabbage. They might come into your field and go, just a cabbage or a turnip, a couple of potatoes. They might come in and, give the goat a little too. Just a wee drop of milk. Because everyone needs food. And it was understood that that was kind of okay. You shouldn't do it. It's stealing. But you're stealing food. It's not a luxury item. So what would normally happen is the boara, the wealthy farmer, would see they're missing a cabbage and they wouldn't think I was robbed. They'd think, oh well, someone was fed, and that would be the end of it. Except for one guy who lived near the Boyne. He was really miserable, didn't like sharing. He was so miserable, in fact, that he would get up before dawn with a stick and he would go into the fields and walk them, hoping to find some poor person looking for a cabbage so that he could whack them about the head and the neck and face, whatever he was in the mood for, how much energy he had. But generally, so he would do this every morning before dawn. One morning, he was on the edge of his land, near a bit of a forest and an old graveyard, and he heard some voices. So he crept up with the hope of hitting somebody. And then, as he got a little bit nearer, he could hear that the voice was a child's voice. And they were crying. And it was heartbreaking. But he put that aside because he's going to be able to hit someone with a stick. And he moved closer and closer until he could hear that the child was also saying something. The child was saying, Mommy, Mommy, I'm so thirsty, I'm going to die of the thirst. And then this beautiful voice, like music, just comes in behind him. Oh, my baby, don't worry, don't worry. When the maid's milking the cow, I'll knock the pail over. You'll have all the drink you want. Boara's not happy with this. Lifts up his stick, goes in looking for them. There's someone's getting their head smashed in. But he can't find anybody. There's no one there. Now, he heard them, but he can't see them. Alright, so he finishes his walk, he goes back to his farm, he goes up behind the maid, and he says, right, I'm watching you. You, Burley, come over here, man. Tie the cow's legs together. Not a drop of that milk's getting spilt. And not a drop got spilt. Farm was quite happy with himself. Now, he could still hear the sad crying of that baby. But he also got to keep his milk. So he goes back into his house, he passes his son, the only other thing he loved in the world, gives him a tap. Ah, fella, sits at the table, said, feed me. And they served him, because he was rich. Next morning, he gets up again at the crack of dawn. Before, still dark. gets his stick, goes into the fields, looks at all the stuff he owns, and thinks, yeah, not sharing a drop of it. Carries on, gets to the trees in the old bit of graveyard, and he hears that voice again. Now this time he's determined to find him. And he creeps around, he's going, shit. He hears her crying, he's like, oh, that kid's getting a smack. And the wee child cries, Mommy, Mommy, I almost died of the thirst and I'm so hungry, I'm starving. And that beautiful, soft, melodic voice, like something from a choir, comes in and says, don't worry, my baby. When the maid is making bread today, I'll knock some over for you. Right, thinks the Boara. And he runs around looking for these two, and he's going to go to town on them. Except he still can't find them. So he goes back to his house. He goes in, he calls the maids together. He says, right, lock up the flour. No bread's being made today. Nothing. I don't want any of it. They're like, but food. And I'm not having any. Don't cook it. So they literally lock away the flour. But the Boara can still hear that kid's crying, and it is kind of haunting. And it sticks with him the whole day. Until by afternoon, he has to have something to eat because he's hungry. Because he can hear that kid crying about food, and it's making his tummy rumble. But he waits a little longer. Then it gets dark. And then he, yes please, make me some bread. Just enough for one person. And the maid goes off, makes the bread, brings it back, smears it with butter, chomps on it. He can still hear the kid crying in his head, but he got to have his bread. He goes to bed a little early because he's feeling kind of crap. And he can still hear the child crying. And it's all night. So even before dawn this next day, he's out. And he has a stick. And he's so angry. He wants to fight. Because he can't rest now with that sound. And he gets to the same spot again. And he goes digging through the hedge, and he's looking through rocks and behind old headstones. He's like, oh, I'll find you people. But he still can't see anyone. But he hears them. He hears the child. Mommy, I didn't get a drink. I didn't even get any milk or bread. I'm so hungry. I'm dying of the hunger. Just let me die here. And then that beautiful sound, that wonderful voice, like an angel, comes in. Don't worry, my baby. The curse will be lifted soon. You don't have to die, but someone will. The farmer's son's gonna die. 2 days. Just give it 2 days. You what? Farmer books it back to the farm. Boy! Sees the son's messing at something. He runs over. What are you at? Son's there sharpening a spear. Oh, Dad, you wouldn't believe it. King of Leinster, idiot, handing out silver brooches. Gone to a fight. Going to war. No, you're not. Men. Bunch of big farming types come along. Build a wall around that house. Around the house. Build it around the house. Close to the walls. Block the doors and windows and everything. I don't like getting in there. Right? No problem. We'll build the wall. So they start building up the wall, and once they get to the point where it's the height of a man, he says, right, boy, in. And the son's like, no. Right, lads. They lift up the son, they take him up the wall, they drop him in. And then they start packing rocks around the roof. So that he is now imprisoned in this. And he's inside going, Dad, you lost it, old man. And the farmer's like, in 3 days I'll let you out. Because then I'll have beaten the faeries. And he goes back into the house, and he sits with a smile, and he thinks, right, I want some milk, I want some bread, and I want to have a good night's sleep afterwards. And he does. Next morning, well before dawn, because he's excited now, forgets his stick. He's out in the field, he's all happy. He's looking, oh look, a cow, cabbages, faeries. And he hears one. He hears the child. Except the child's not crying, the child's giggling. And the farmer's like, okay, well, it's disconcerting, but, whatever. And the child says, ha ha ha. The farmer's like, well, I don't like that sound at all. And the mother says, in her lovely little voice, it's not funny, don't be laughing, you're at a grave. And the wee boy says, but Mom, the farmer's son didn't go to war, he's not going to die. He was locked in a cell of stone. And that beautiful angelic voice, like the wind or a wee breeze, just comes in and says, all he needed was the tools to get out. So I give him the tools. Farmer, pre-conniption, runs back to the farm as fast as he can go, gets to the cell he's built for his own son, climbs up it, boy, no answer. Gets to the top, looks in, and there's a boy-shaped hole. And a chisel and hammer. By this point, people have gathered around and say, "Oh, right, boss." And he climbs back down. He goes into the house. He pulls up a chair. He sits. He just sits down. Day passes. He hasn't said a word. People are looking at him. Man's cracked. It's bound to happen. It's creepy. Another day passes. He still hasn't moved. He's still in the chair. On the third day, there's some commotion. Someone comes up and says something to him, but he's not paying attention. And then a bunch of men come past him. And they're carrying his dead son. And they put him on the table. And there's a piece of spear. Still didn't react. You see, the only two things that mattered to him were his wealth and his son. And his son was his heart. And the heart was taken from him by his own greed. People mourned the son. They loved that young fella. He was a good lad. No one gave a crap about the farmer. He didn't last a year. And at his funeral, no one was there. Even the priest forgot it was happening. Don't be a greedy bastard.